Kim Tae-ho stared at the strange blue document in his hands. The words were written in perfect Korean, but they talked about things that seemed impossible. Aliens. Other planets. A job that would take him far away from Earth. He sat in a small, white room inside a building that looked normal from the outside. But the woman across from him was definitely not normal. Her skin had a slight green tint, and her eyes were too large for her face. She wore a simple gray uniform with symbols. He could not read. "Mr. Kim," the woman said in careful Korean. "You understand what we are asking, yes?" Tae-ho nodded slowly. 3 days ago, he had been teaching wilderness survival to corporate groups in the mountains outside Seoul. Yesterday, strange people in black cars had visited his small apartment. They had shown him identification that hurt his eyes to look at directly. They had told him about something called the Galactic Council. "You want me to teach aliens how to make fire and find water," Tae-ho said. "That seems too simple." The green-skinned woman smiled. Her teeth were perfectly white and perfectly straight. "The Velthani are very advanced people. They have technology that can heal any injury. They can travel between stars in days. They can speak to each other across vast distances without any devices. Then why do they need me? Their machines have broken. Solar storms have damaged their systems. They cannot fix them quickly. Without their technology, they cannot survive. They do not know how to live without machines." Tae-ho had spent 15 years in the Korean military. He had learned to survive in forests, deserts, and mountains using nothing but basic tools. After leaving the army, he had started his own business teaching these skills to civilians. It was simple work, but he was good at it. "How long would I be gone?" 6 months. You would live with them on their planet. You would teach them what humans call survival skills. When their technology is repaired, you would return home. The woman pushed another document across the table. This one showed numbers that made Tae-ho's eyes widen. The payment was more money than he could make in 5 years of teaching. "The planet is called Velthara," the woman continued. "It is similar to Earth. The air is safe to breathe. The water is safe to drink. The Velthani people look different from humans, but they think in similar ways." Tae-ho picked up the second document. The money would let him buy a small house in the mountains. He could stop worrying about rent. He could expand his business when he returned. "What if something goes wrong? What if I get sick or injured?" "The Velthani have excellent medical technology. They can heal almost any problem. You would be safer there than on Earth in many ways." He thought about his life in Seoul, his small apartment, his few friends, his simple routine of work, home, and sleep. Nothing was keeping him here. His parents had died 2 years ago. He had no wife or children. "I accept," he said. The woman's smile grew wider. "Excellent. We will begin preparations immediately." 3 days later, Tae-ho stood inside what the aliens called a transport ship. It looked like a large metal room with no windows. The walls glowed with soft blue light. He carried a single backpack with his clothes and a few basic tools. The woman who had recruited him, who called herself Agent Yeon, stood beside him. "The journey will take 4 days," she said. "You will sleep for most of it. When you wake up, you will be on Velthara." Tae-ho lay down on something that looked like a comfortable bed. Agent Yeon placed a small device on his forehead. "This will help you sleep and learn the Velthani language while you travel." The world became dark and quiet. When Tae-ho woke up, he was lying on the same bed, but everything felt different. The air smelled strange, like flowers mixed with metal. The blue light on the walls had changed to warm yellow. "Welcome to Velthara," Agent Yeon said. She was standing by what must be a door, though it looked like just another part of the wall. Tae-ho sat up and was surprised to find he felt perfectly rested. "How long was I asleep?" 4 days, as promised. "Come. The Velthani are waiting to meet you." The door opened without sound, sliding into the wall like water. Outside was a world that took Tae-ho's breath away. The sky was pale green instead of blue. 2 suns hung low on the horizon, one yellow like Earth's sun, the other smaller, and orange. Strange trees with silver leaves grew everywhere, and in the distance he could see tall buildings that seemed to be made of colored glass. A group of beings approached the ship. They walked on two legs like humans, but that was where the similarity ended. Their skin was covered in small scales that shifted color from green to brown as they moved. They had large eyes that blinked sideways instead of up and down. Their hands had 4 fingers instead of 5, and each finger was longer than a human finger. The tallest of these beings stepped forward. When it spoke, Teho was amazed to discover he could understand the words perfectly. "Welcome, human teacher," the being said in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. "I am Keth Rimval, leader of this settlement. We are grateful that you have come to help us." Teho bowed slightly, the way he had been taught to greet important people. "I am Kim Teho. I will do my best to teach you what I know." Keth Rimval's large eyes studied him carefully. "We have heard that humans can live without technology, that you can make fire without machines, that you can find food and water using only your hands and simple tools. Is this true?" "Yes, it is true. Show me." Teho looked around and saw what he needed. He picked up 2 dry sticks from the ground near the silver-leafed trees. He found a small pile of dead leaves. In less than 5 minutes, he had created a small fire using only friction. The Velthani stepped back in amazement. Several of them made sounds that might have been gasps of surprise. "How?" Keth Rimval asked. There was no energy source, no chemical reaction chamber, no ignition device. Teho smiled. This was going to be more interesting than he had thought. "That is what I am here to teach you." Teho woke up in his new home on the 3rd day. The Velthani had given him a small dwelling that looked like it was grown from a single piece of white stone. Everything inside worked perfectly. The bed adjusted to his body. The walls provided light when he needed it. Water came from taps that appeared when he reached for them. But outside the settlement, nothing worked anymore. "The solar storms damaged our main systems," Keth Rimval explained as they walked through the settlement. "We have backup power for essential things like homes and medical centers, but our food production systems are broken. Our water purification plants work only sometimes. Our environmental controls keep failing." Teho looked around at the 50,000 Velthani living in the settlement. They moved slowly, their scales shifting to darker colors that he was learning meant worry or fear. Many gathered around broken machines, staring at them helplessly. "How did your people live before these machines?" Teho asked. Keth Rimval was quiet for a long moment. "We do not remember. That knowledge was lost thousands of years ago when we achieved technological advancement. We gave up the old ways because we thought we no longer needed them." That afternoon, Teho held his first official lesson. About 200 Velthani gathered in the settlement's central plaza. Their large eyes watched him with a mixture of curiosity and doubt. "Today we will learn to purify water without machines," Teho announced. He had spent the morning collecting materials: sand, gravel, cloth from damaged equipment, and containers from their storage areas. He built a simple filtration system using layers of cloth, sand, and gravel in a tall container. Then he took muddy water from a pond outside the settlement and poured it through the system. Clean, clear water came out the bottom. The Velthani made soft, whistling sounds, which Teho had learned meant amazement. "But how does it work?" asked a Velthani whose scales were bright blue with excitement. "There is no power source, no chemical processors, no molecular scanners." Teho smiled. "The sand and gravel catch the dirt particles. The cloth catches smaller pieces. Gravity pulls the water down through the layers. It is simple physics." An older Velthani named Youth Nalvin stepped forward. His scales were darker than the others, showing his age. "Gravity," he said slowly. "We use gravity to power our great machines, but we never thought to use it for such simple tasks." Over the following days, Teho taught them more basic skills. He showed them how to identify edible plants by looking at their leaves and testing small amounts. He demonstrated how to build shelter using branches and leaves. He taught them to make simple tools by shaping stones and metal scraps. The Velthani struggled with these concepts at first. Their minds were trained to look for complex solutions. When Tai-Ho showed them how to sharpen a knife using only stones, they asked about molecular edge alignment and crystalline structure optimization. Sometimes the simple way is the best way, Tai-Ho told them. A sharp stone can cut just as well as a laser blade. It will never run out of power. It cannot break. From system failures. The breakthrough came during the second week. 3 young Velthani had gone exploring in the crystal forests beyond the settlement. The forests were beautiful, but dangerous, filled with sharp crystal formations and deep crevices. When the children did not return by evening, panic spread through the settlement. Peth Curvin was only 12 years old in human terms. She had gone with her friends Lyra Selveth and Mek Valdrin to collect pretty crystals for their families. Now they were lost somewhere in the vast forest. Keth Rimval organized search teams using the settlement's standard protocols. They would use heat sensors to detect the children's body temperature. They would send out drone scanners to map the search area. They would establish communication networks to coordinate the teams, but the equipment kept failing. The solar storm damage made all their technology unreliable. The search teams moved slowly, stopping whenever their devices stopped working. Tai-Ho approached Keth Rimval as the second day of searching began. "Let me try a different way." "What do you mean?" "Human methods. No technology. Just observation and logic." Keth Rimval's scales showed doubt, but he was desperate. "Very well, but our teams will continue their search as well." Tai-Ho went to the edge of the crystal forest alone. He knelt down and studied the ground carefully. The Velthani children had left tracks in the soft earth, but the search teams had walked over most of them. He found a clear footprint and followed it into the forest. The Velthani were lighter than humans, but their 4-toed feet left distinctive marks. He looked for broken twigs, disturbed leaves, anything that showed which direction they had gone. The trail led deeper into the forest than the search teams had gone. Tai-Ho moved carefully, watching for the dangerous crystal formations. He used his ears as much as his eyes, listening for any sound that might be the children calling for help. After 4 hours, he heard something. A faint voice echoing off the crystal walls. He followed the sound and found the 3 children trapped in a deep crevice. They were scared and hungry, but not seriously injured. Using rope from his pack and techniques he had learned in the military, Tai-Ho lowered himself into the crevice and brought each child up safely. When he returned to the settlement with the 3 children, the entire population was waiting. The children ran to their families amid joyful whistling and scale color changes that meant happiness and relief. Keth Rimval approached Tai-Ho with something that looked like respect. "Our search teams with all their technology could not find them. You found them in hours using no technology at all. How is this possible?" Tai-Ho looked at the gathered Velthani. "I used my eyes to see the tracks they left. I used my ears to hear their voices. I used my mind to think about where scared children might go. These are not special human abilities. These are basic skills that any thinking being can learn." Elder Youth Nalvin stepped forward. His scales showed deep thought patterns. "We have forgotten how to use our own senses. We have forgotten how to think without machines telling us what to think." That night, more Velthani came to Tai-Ho's dwelling. They wanted to learn. They wanted to understand how humans could be so effective with such simple methods. For the first time since arriving on Velthara, Tai-Ho began to understand that his job might be more important than anyone had realized. The warning came at dawn on Tai-Ho's 20th day on Velthara. Every Velthani in the settlement began making sharp, high-pitched sounds that hurt his ears. Their scales turned black with fear. "Solar storm approaching," Keth Rimval told him, his voice shaking. "Much larger than the ones that damaged our systems. This one will shut down everything for weeks." Tai-Ho looked up at the green sky. The 2 suns seemed brighter than usual and the air felt strange, like the feeling before a thunderstorm on Earth. "What does that mean exactly?" "All power will fail. All machines will stop working. Our food synthesizers, our water purifiers, our environmental controls, our communication systems, everything." The panic in the settlement grew worse as the day continued. Vilthani ran around frantically trying to prepare for something they did not understand. They filled containers with synthesized food, but most of it would spoil without refrigeration. They gathered emergency supplies, but their emergency supplies were all technological devices that would soon be useless. As the first sun set, the storm hit. Every light in the settlement went out at once. The gentle humming of machines that had provided constant background noise suddenly stopped. In the silence that followed, Teho could hear 50,000 Velthani making sounds of terror. The second sun disappeared behind a wall of strange, glowing clouds. Lightning that was not quite lightning danced across the sky in colors that had no names. The storm was beautiful and terrible at the same time. By the second day, the situation became desperate. The Velthani had no idea how to function without their technology. They stood around their dead machines, touching them hopefully, waiting for them to start working again. Children cried from hunger. The elderly suffered as their medical devices stopped working. The food synthesizers had produced nothing for 2 days, and the stored food was already running low. Teho realized that no one was going to take charge. The Velthani leadership was as lost as everyone else. Their entire culture was built around technology that no longer worked. He found Keth Rimval standing in the central plaza, staring at a massive communication device that showed no signs of life. "Keth," Teho said firmly, "I need you to gather everyone right now. But the communication system is not working. We cannot reach everyone. Then we use voices. Send people to every part of the settlement. Tell everyone to come to the plaza immediately." Keth Rimval's scales showed confusion, but he followed Teho's instructions. Within an hour, most of the settlement had gathered. They filled the plaza and spilled out into the surrounding areas. Teho stood on a platform where the Velthani leaders usually spoke. He looked out at 50,000 frightened faces. "I know you are scared," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Your machines have stopped working, but you are not helpless. You have hands. You have minds. You have each other. That is enough." He organized them the way he had organized soldiers during emergency training exercises. He divided them into groups based on their living areas. Each group got specific tasks. "Group 1, he called out, pointing to the eastern section of the settlement. "You will find and gather all containers, pots, bowls, anything that can hold water. The rain from the storm is safe to drink, but we need ways to collect it." Group 2. "You will gather wood and other materials for fires. We need heat and light until the storm passes. Look for dry branches, broken furniture, anything that will burn." Group 3. "You will work with me to identify food sources. There are edible plants outside the settlement. We will find them and gather enough for everyone." The Velthani looked uncertain, but they began to move. They had no other choice. Teho worked for 18 hours straight. He showed them how to build fires using metal from broken machines and dry plant material. He taught them to collect rainwater using cloth stretched between buildings. He led expeditions outside the settlement to gather roots, fruits, and leaves that could be eaten safely. The most difficult part was convincing them to try new foods. The Velthani had eaten only synthesized nutrition blocks for generations. The idea of eating plants that grew in the ground seemed strange and dangerous to them. "Trust me," Teho told each group. "Humans have eaten these types of plants for thousands of years. Your bodies can process them safely." On the 4th day of the storm, something unexpected happened. A Velthani named Reth Voklan approached Teho with an idea. Reth was a scientist who had been studying the broken machines. His scales showed the deep blue patterns that meant intense thinking. "Human teacher," Reth said, "I have been watching what you do with the fires and the water collection. I think we can make something better." "What do you mean?" "You use gravity to filter water through sand and cloth. But what if we use gravity to turn wheels? The wheels could power machines even during the storm." Teho smiled. This was exactly what he had hoped would happen. "Show me what you are thinking." Together they built the first wind-powered generator the Velthani had ever seen. They used metal from damaged equipment, cloth for sails, and wheels from broken transport vehicles. The wind from the storm turned the wheels, which generated enough power to run essential medical equipment. The project took 3 days, but when it worked, the sound of joy from the Velthani was louder than the storm. Other Velthani began approaching with their own ideas. They combined human techniques with their knowledge of science and engineering. They built better water filters using advanced materials. They created more efficient cooking fires using controlled airflow. They designed food storage systems that worked without refrigeration. By the 10th day of the storm, something remarkable had happened. The settlement was not just surviving, it was thriving. The Velthani had organized themselves into efficient work groups. They had built systems that provided clean water, cooked food, and warm shelter for everyone. They had even started growing their own food using seeds from the plants they had gathered. When the storm finally ended and power returned to their machines, they made a surprising discovery. Their new systems worked better than the old ones. The hand-built water filters produced cleaner water than their technological purifiers had. The crops they had planted by hand grew faster and produced more food than their automated systems had. The community structures they had built during the crisis made their society stronger and more connected. Tejo sat in his dwelling on the last night of the storm, listening to the sounds of a settlement that had transformed itself. Instead of the quiet desperation of helpless people waiting for machines to save them, he heard the voices of people working together to solve problems. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. When the machines came back online, the Velthani discovered something that shocked them. They did not want to go back to their old ways. Tejo watched from his dwelling as groups of Velthani stood around their newly working food synthesizers and water purifiers. But instead of celebrating, they talked quietly among themselves, their scales showing confusion and uncertainty. Keth Rimval visited him that morning, his colors shifting between curiosity and excitement. "Human teacher," he said, "we have a problem that is not really a problem." "What do you mean?" "Our food systems are working again, but the food from our gardens tastes better. Our water machines are functional again, but our hand-built filters produce cleaner water. Our heating systems have power again, but our fires provide more comfortable warmth." Tejo smiled. "So what will you do?" "We want to keep both, the machines and the hand-built systems, but we do not know how to combine them properly." This was exactly what Tejo had hoped to hear. "Then let us figure it out together." The next weeks became the most interesting of Tejo's time on Velthara. The Velthani had discovered that they enjoyed solving problems with their own minds and hands, but they still had access to advanced technology that could make their solutions even better. Reth Vauquelin became his closest collaborator. The scientist had never been so excited about anything in his life. His scales stayed bright blue with constant thinking, and he barely slept. "Look at this," Reth said, showing Tejo a new water filter they had designed together. "We use your sand and cloth method, but we add our materials that can catch molecular-level impurities, and we use our gravity field generators to make the water flow faster." The result was a water purification system that worked better than anything the Velthani had built before. It needed no external power, could not break down like complex machines, and produced water that was cleaner than anything their advanced technology had ever achieved. They applied the same thinking to everything: food production, shelter construction, tool making, even art and entertainment. Geth Malvor was an engineer who had spent his entire life maintaining complicated machines. Now he worked with Tejo to design simple, flexible systems that could adapt to changing conditions. "Your human word is improvisation," Geth said as they worked on a new type of building foundation. "We never had this concept before. If our machines broke, we could only fix them in one specific way. But with improvisation, if something breaks, we can fix it in many different ways." The foundation they designed could be built using local materials on any type of ground. It could be modified based on weather conditions, available resources, or changing needs. But it also incorporated Velthani technology that made it stronger and more durable than anything humans had ever built. Tejo also discovered that he had a natural talent for understanding how the Velthani learned best. They were logical thinkers who needed to understand the science behind everything. So instead of just showing them techniques, he explained the physics, chemistry, and biology that made those techniques work. When you rub two sticks together to make fire, he explained to a group of young Velthani, you are converting kinetic energy into thermal energy through friction. The wood reaches its combustion temperature and begins oxidizing rapidly, which creates more heat and light. The young Velthani whistled with understanding. When they understood the science, they could improve the techniques. They built fire-starting tools that worked faster and required less effort. They created tinder from plants that burned more efficiently. They designed fire containment systems that were safer and provided better heat control. One of these young students was Peth Kirvan, the girl Teho had rescued from the crystal forest. She had become fascinated with human-style problem-solving and spent every free moment learning new skills. Teacher Teho, she said one day, I want to teach others what you have taught me, but I want to teach them in our Veltani way of thinking. What do you mean? You show us how to do things with our hands first, then explain the science. But we Velthani understand the science first, then want to try with our hands. I think I can teach our children more easily if I start with the science. She was right. Peth Kirvan became the first Velthani to successfully teach human-style skills to other Velthani. She started with young people who were naturally curious and adaptable. Soon she had a group of 20 students who could think like humans when solving problems, but who also used their advanced Velthani knowledge to improve everything they did. These young Velthani began creating things that neither humans nor traditional Velthani could have imagined. They built tools that adapted themselves to different tasks. They grew plants that could change their nutritional content based on what their bodies needed. They designed shelters that could reshape themselves based on weather conditions. As Taiho's fourth month on Velthara began, he realized that something historic was happening. The Velthani were not just learning human survival skills. They were creating an entirely new way of thinking that combined the best of both species. The evidence was everywhere. Velthani scientists were making breakthrough discoveries by applying improvisation to their research. Instead of following strict procedures, they learned to adapt their experiments when unexpected results occurred. This led to new discoveries happening much faster than ever before. Velthani engineers created more robust systems by designing them to work even when parts failed. Instead of building machines that had to work perfectly or not at all, they built machines that could continue functioning even when damaged. Even Velthani art and culture began changing. Their traditional music had always followed precise mathematical patterns. But influenced by human creativity, young Velthani musicians began improvising, creating new sounds that mixed mathematical precision with emotional expression. Their literature, which had always been formal histories and technical documents, began including stories of adventure and personal experience. They started writing about feelings, relationships, and individual struggles rather than just facts and data. Most importantly, their society became more flexible and resilient. Before the crisis, the Velthani had been completely dependent on their technology and rigid social structures. Now they could adapt to changing conditions, solve unexpected problems, and work together in new ways. Tai-Ho sat in the settlement's central plaza one evening, watching Velthani children playing games that combined human creativity with Velthani logic. Their parents worked nearby on projects that mixed traditional craftsmanship with advanced engineering. Keth Rimval joined him on the bench. His scales showed the warm colors that meant contentment and satisfaction. Human teacher, Keth said, we have learned much from you, but I think you have also learned much from us. Teho nodded. It was true. Working with the Velthani had taught him to think more systematically about problem solving. He had learned to combine intuition with scientific analysis. He had discovered that the best solutions often came from mixing different approaches rather than using just one method. What will happen when my 6 months are finished? Teho asked. Keth Rimval was quiet for a long time. His scales showed the deep patterns that meant important thinking. That, he said finally, is something we need to discuss. The message from the Galactic Council arrived on Tai-Ho's 160th day on Velthara. It appeared on his communication device as he was working with a group of young Velthani on a new water collection system. Mr. Kim, the message said in formal Korean. "Your assignment on Velthara is nearly complete. We have arranged transport for your return to Earth in 14 days. Your next assignment will be on the planet Korthax, where the Reptilian Coalition needs assistance with food preservation techniques." Taeho stared at the message for a long time. 6 months ago, he would have been happy to hear about his next job and the money it would bring. But now the thought of leaving Velthara felt wrong. He had not just taught the Velthani survival skills, he had helped them discover a completely new way of thinking. And they had taught him things he never could have learned on Earth. That evening, Keth Rimval requested a meeting with him, but when Taeho arrived at the government building, he found much more than just the settlement leader waiting for him. The large meeting room was filled with Velthani. Elder Youth Nalvin sat at the head of a long table, his ancient scales showing, the deep silver patterns that meant great wisdom. Reth Vauclin and Geth Malver were there, along with other scientists and engineers. Peth Kurvan sat with a group of the young Velthani who had become the first generation of hybrid thinkers. But most surprising of all, there were Velthani that Taeho had never seen before. Their scales showed patterns he did not recognize, and they wore clothing that looked different from the local style. "Human teacher," Elder Youth Nalvin said, "please sit. We have much to discuss." Taeho took a seat near the middle of the table. The room was completely quiet, except for the soft sounds of Velthani breathing. "These visitors," Keth Rimval said, gesturing to the unfamiliar Velthani, "have come from 17 different worlds. Word of your teachings has spread throughout our civilization." One of the visitors, a female Velthani, whose scales were lighter than the locals, stood up. "I am Leth Norvak from the world of Kethrim. 3 months ago, Keth Rimval sent us information about human problem-solving methods. We tried them in our agricultural research centers." She paused, her scales shifting to show excitement. "Our crop production increased by 40% in the first month. Our researchers began finding solutions to problems that had puzzled us for decades. Our entire approach to science has been revolutionized." Another visitor stood. "I am Zeth Kavlon from Yeltris Station. We used human adaptability concepts in our engineering projects. We built systems that can function in ways we never thought possible. Our space habitats are now safer and more efficient than ever before." One by one, the visitors shared similar stories. Every Velthani world that had tried implementing human-style thinking had experienced dramatic improvements in problem-solving, innovation, and adaptability. Elder Youth Nalvin listened to each report with growing amazement. When the last visitor finished speaking, he turned to Taeho. "Human teacher," he said, "you came here to teach us simple survival skills, but you have given us something far more valuable. You have taught us how to think in ways we had forgotten. You have shown us that the combination of knowledge and adaptability is more powerful than either one alone." Reth Vauclin stood up, his scales bright blue with excitement. "We have been in contact with our scientists on other worlds. They are reporting breakthrough discoveries in every field: medicine, engineering, agriculture, even art and philosophy. The human way of thinking is transforming our entire civilization." Taeho felt overwhelmed. He had just been trying to teach basic survival skills to help them get through a crisis. He had never intended to change their entire civilization. "But there is more," Keith Rimval continued. "We have made a formal request to the Galactic Council. We want you to stay permanently, not as a temporary teacher, but as a permanent advisor and collaborator." The room erupted in sounds of agreement. Every Velthani in the room made the whistling noises that meant strong approval. Elder Youth Nalvin raised a hand for silence. "We are not asking you to give up your human life to serve us. We are offering you a new kind of life that combines the best of both our worlds." "What do you mean?" Leth Norvak, the visitor from Kethrim, answered. "We have contacted the human governments on Earth. We have offered to share our medical technology, our energy systems, our transportation methods. In exchange, we want to establish permanent cultural and educational exchanges. Your people call it the Interspecies Adaptive Learning Program," added Zeth Kavlon. "Humans would come to our worlds to teach adaptability and creative problem-solving. Velthani would go to Earth to share our scientific knowledge and technological capabilities." Taeho's mind raced. This was bigger than anything he had imagined. What did the Earth government say? They agreed immediately, Keth Rimval said with what looked like a smile. They are very interested in our technology, and they are proud that human thinking methods are so valuable to advanced civilizations. But what about the Galactic Council? They want me to report to my next assignment. Elder Youth Nalvin's scales shifted to show determination. We have made an official petition to the Council. 17 Velthani worlds have signed it. We are offering unprecedented technology sharing and research collaboration. In exchange, we want permission for you to remain here and help establish the new program. Peeth Curvin, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. Teacher Teho, she said, her young voice filled with hope, you taught me that humans can adapt to any situation. You can make any place your home. Velthara could be your home if you wanted it to be. The room fell silent again. Teho looked around at all the faces watching him. These beings had become more than just students. They had become friends, colleagues, and something like family. But he thought about Earth too. His small apartment in Seoul, the mountains where he had learned his skills, the familiar sounds and smells of home. I need time to think, he said finally. Of course, Elder Youth Nalvin replied. This is the most important decision any being can make. The choice of where to build a life and what kind of future to create. That night, Teho sat outside his dwelling looking up at the green sky and the 2 moons of Velthara. In 14 days, a ship would come to take him back to Earth and his old life. But his old life seemed small now compared to what he could build here. On Earth, he was just one survival instructor among many. On Velthara, he could help create something that had never existed before. A new kind of civilization that combined human adaptability with alien knowledge. The choice was his, to make. Teho made his decision 3 days before the transport ship was scheduled to arrive. He would stay on Velthara, but not in the way anyone expected. He called a meeting with the Velthani leadership and presented his proposal. I want to create something new, he told them. Not just a place where I teach Velthani to think like humans, but a place where humans and Velthani learn to think together in ways neither species could achieve alone. The idea excited everyone. Within days, construction began on the Interspecies Adaptive Learning Institute. The building itself was designed using combined human and Velthani methods. It could adapt to different weather conditions, expand when needed, and provide comfortable environments for both species. But the real innovation was in the program itself. Instead of human teachers and Velthani students, there would be mixed teams working on real problems. Humans and Velthani would tackle challenges together, each contributing their unique strengths. The first class began 6 months later. 12 humans had volunteered to come to Velthara, and 24 Velthani had signed up to work with them. The age range was from teenagers to elderly scholars, and their backgrounds covered everything from farming to space engineering. Teho served as the program director, but he was no longer the only human teacher. The other humans brought different skills: medical knowledge, engineering expertise, artistic abilities, and various forms of craftsmanship. The first project was to design a new type of emergency shelter that could be built quickly by either species on any planet. The human Velthani team spent weeks working together, combining human improvisational skills with Velthani scientific precision. The result was revolutionary. The shelter could be constructed from local materials using simple tools, but it incorporated advanced principles that made it stronger and more comfortable than anything either species had built alone. It could adapt to extreme heat, cold, radiation, or toxic atmospheres. It could be built by one person in a few hours, or expanded to house hundreds. Word of the success spread quickly. Other species in the Galactic Council began requesting similar programs. The Institute received funding to expand and establish branches on multiple worlds. Reth Voklin, now co-director of the Institute's research division, led a team that developed new technologies by combining human creativity with Velthani engineering. They created machines that could repair themselves when damaged, buildings that could change their purpose based on need, and communication systems that worked even when most components failed. Geth Malvor founded the Infrastructure Division. His teams traveled to planets throughout the galaxy, teaching local populations how to build systems that were both technologically advanced and adaptable to local conditions. They helped civilizations create backup systems that could function during emergencies and primary systems that worked better than anything they had before. Peth Curvin, now grown and brilliant, became the head of the Education Division. She developed teaching methods that worked for any species, combining logical understanding with hands-on experience. Her programs trained thousands of beings to think adaptively while using their natural strengths. But the most surprising success was in the Art and Culture Division. Humans and Velthani working together created new forms of music, literature, and visual art that neither species could have imagined alone. Their work became popular throughout the galaxy, inspiring other species to explore creative collaboration. 5. Years after the Institute opened, Tejo stood in the main classroom watching a lesson that would have been impossible when he first arrived on Velthera. The teacher was a young human woman named Park Sojin, who specialized in emergency medicine. Her students included 3 Velthani scientists, 2 human engineers, and a plant-like being from the chlorophyll worlds, whose name was approximately rustling leaves in morning light. They were learning to perform surgery using both advanced alien technology and simple human backup methods. If their laser scalpels failed, they could use carefully prepared metal tools. If their diagnostic computers stopped working, they could identify problems through observation and touch. If their anesthesia machines broke, they could use local, plants and pressure point techniques. The goal, Sojin explained, is not to choose between advanced and simple methods. The goal is to combine them so you can always help people no matter what resources you have available. The students practiced on artificial patients, working in mixed species teams. They solved problems that no single species could have handled, alone. They developed techniques that were more reliable and effective than anything that had existed before. Tejo smiled as he watched. This was exactly what he had hoped to create. After class, he walked through the Institute grounds. The original settlement had grown into a small city that housed beings from dozens of species. Humans, Velthani, and visitors from throughout the galaxy lived and worked together. In the gardens, human and Velthani children played together, inventing games that combined physical skills with intellectual puzzles. They grew up learning to think in multiple ways, adapting their problem-solving approach to whatever situation they faced. In the workshops, mixed teams built tools and machines that worked better than anything created by a single species. They designed solutions to problems that had challenged civilizations for centuries. In the research labs, breakthrough discoveries happened regularly as different ways of thinking combined to reveal new possibilities. The Institute had become more than an educational facility. It had become proof that cooperation between different species could create something greater than the sum of its parts. That evening, Tejo received a message that made him smile. The Galactic Council had officially changed the classification of humans in their records. Where it once read primitive but resourceful, it now said Specialist Adaptive Intelligence Consultants. More importantly, dozens of other species had requested human advisors, not to teach basic survival skills but to help them develop flexible thinking and creative problem-solving abilities. Humanity's first major contribution to galactic civilization was not technology or military power, but a way of thinking. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find a young Velthani girl with bright, curious scales. This was Mira Kimseth, whom he had adopted 2 years ago after her family died in an accident. She was learning to think in both human and Velthani ways, and she had become more precious to him than anything else in his life. "Father Tejo," she said in perfect Korean, "will you teach me the fire-making lesson tomorrow? I want to show the new students from the crystal worlds." "Of course," he replied. "But why do you want to learn the old friction method? We have much better tools now." Mira's scales shifted to show thoughtful patterns. "Because the new students have never seen anything work without their crystal technology. If I show them how to make fire with just wood and patience, They will understand that any problem can be solved if you think about it the right way. Taeho knelt down and hugged his daughter. She had learned the most important lesson of all. The specific technique was not what mattered. What mattered was the confidence to adapt, to try new approaches, and to never give up when facing a challenge. The next morning, Taeho stood in the institute's main courtyard with Mira and a group of 20 new students from various worlds. The students included crystal-based beings who had never seen organic fire, energy creatures who existed as pure thought, and mechanical beings who processed information in ways completely different from biological life. Today, Taeho announced, we will learn to make fire using only wood and friction. This is not because wood fires are better than energy beams or crystal heating. This is to prove that any thinking being can solve problems using available resources and determination. He demonstrated the technique, explaining each step clearly. The friction between the wooden sticks generated heat. The heat ignited small pieces of dry plant material. The small flame was carefully fed with larger materials until it became a sustainable fire. The students watched with fascination. To them, the ability to create energy from simple materials using only physical force was as amazing as faster-than-light travel had once been to humans. Then it was their turn to try. The crystal beings had to learn to use their normally precise movements in rough, approximate ways. The energy creatures had to work through mechanical tools to affect the physical world. The artificial beings had to understand organic processes that were completely different from their programming. All of them struggled at first. But with patience and adaptation, each student eventually created their own fire. The moment when their flames caught was met with sounds of joy and achievement that translated across all species. Remember this feeling, Taeho told them as they sat around their fires. You have just proven that you can accomplish something you thought was impossible. You can adapt to challenges you have never faced before. You can learn to think in new ways. That ability will serve you well no matter what problems you encounter in the future. As the sun set over Vilthara, painting the green sky in shades of gold and purple, Taeho looked around at the mixed group of beings sharing warmth from fires they had made with their own efforts. Humans, Veltani, and aliens from across the galaxy sat together, talking excitedly about what they had learned and what they wanted to try next. This was his legacy, not just the survival skills he had taught, but the idea that any intelligent being could learn to adapt, to improvise, and to solve problems creatively. The specific techniques would continue to evolve and improve, but the underlying principle would remain the same. In a universe full of advanced technology and ancient wisdom, sometimes the most powerful tool was simply the willingness to try something new. Mira leaned against his shoulder as the stars appeared in the alien sky. "Father," she said quietly, "when I grow up, I want to start programs on other worlds too. I want to teach beings everywhere that they can adapt to anything." Taeho smiled and put his arm around his daughter. The future of the galaxy would be built by beings like her, who understood that the greatest strength was not in having the perfect tool for every job, but in being able to make any tool work when it was needed. The fire crackled softly as the night grew deeper, and somewhere in the distance he could hear the sounds of humans and aliens working together on tomorrow's challenges. The work would never be finished, but that was exactly what made it worthwhile. After all, adaptation was not a destination. It was a way of traveling through whatever came next.